Hey founders, welcome to today's non-technical founders Q&A. I have a few questions here. I'm gonna go through them. I haven't seen them, so I'm gonna react and just see how it goes. Do you envision a future when being a non-technical founder won't matter when proving for funding? Yeah, for sure. I actually don't know if it matters right now. As I said yesterday, the data I'm starting to gather indicates that it doesn't matter as much as long as you have other ways of proving you're able to execute your product and your business. We're good. That's the data in a very early stage, but we're starting to understand that. Yeah. So, what was the biggest mistake you made as a non-technical founder? I think it's a good one. I'm not sure. I think the biggest mistake I made was not raising funds for a business to consumer business. The startup really needed to grow faster and it had great traction. We had a lot of investors approaching us, wanting to fund us, and we thought we wanted to bootstrap. And I think it was not a good idea. Yeah, if it were a business to business startup, probably would have been a good idea. Business consumer, not at all. Tell us more about your first experience as a non-technical founder, and if you have an insight about it, please share. Well, I'm not the usual non-technical founder in the sense that before I became a non-technical founder, I was a developer, a teenage developer. I wasn't a very, good developer, but I could really build things. It only was for a previous era, right? It was for desktops, apps, for Palm Pilots, things that don't exist anymore. And before the web came and became a thing, I decided I didn't like that. I wanted to focus on business and other things such as arts, which are a passion of mine. And then, I became a non-technical founder when the web came and made everything I knew obsolete, right? When everything I knew became obsolete and I started only taking care of the business in my startups for many years, I found myself as a non-technical founder. I started having the experience of being a non-technical founder. That's the history that brought me there, and I think the biggest insight I have to share is that even with my background in software development, a few years after not coding and not digging into the technical stuff, I was already non-technical. The discussions I had with my co-founders had the same kind of power struggles that we find with technical versus non-technical people, where the technical people insist that something is just not feasible or that something is too complex, or quite the contrary, that I'm gonna do it tonight, this small feature, right? This kind of discussion, it was very fast for me to move from the place of being technical and then being the guy that does not understand how things work. Okay, we lost the questions. Let me scroll up. What should I look for in a CTO? Well, I think the ability to manage the team. CTOs must be business people, right? They cannot be geeks. Of course, they have to be also geeks, but it cannot be only geeks that know about code. They have to know about people, culture, even at the start, or maybe most importantly at the start. So I could say a lot of things you should look for in a CTO, but the most important one is business and people skills. A big part of the work we go through when we're mapping out the first version of a startup product is defining what we won't have yet. What can you tell about non-technical founders about this? Yeah, that's a great question. Something. Let me say. Go back here and talk about the experience of producing a proposal for a software where you say, okay, we're gonna build A, B, and C, right? I spent many years sending proposals where I would just say, okay, this is what we're gonna build, A, B, C, D, and list things that were to be built, right? One day, out of, I don't know, maybe experience, I started adding a section in my proposals that said what we won't have yet, right? And that totally changed the way, the success of my projects, because when I started talking about what we won't have, the communication of what we will have became much more clear. And I think that's what I got from the question. So translating that from the perspective of a service provider to a founder, right? You need to be able to, even before you talk to devs or anybody you want to build your product, right? You need to have a very clear way of communicating what you won't have yet. Because only yesterday I was talking to a founder that received a proposal that was around $700,000 for, and I don't know if it was an MVP, but for something that he was expecting an MVP. And possibly if he had created a document that said, okay, I don't want to do this and that yet. I just want you to build A, B, and C. But being very explicit about what the founder don't want built, probably he wouldn't have gotten an estimate of $700,000, right? My CTO gave me 9 months from idea to first iteration with real users. Am I on track? No. No, man. If your product is not live after 2 months, of course, let me make a parenthesis here. We're talking about consumer apps, business to business app. We're not talking about high tech stuff, right? But if you're doing something that other people are already doing, but in a different way, you should launch within 2 months, 3 months tops. If someone is saying it's gonna take 9 months, you shouldn't go with that person. Or you should do what we just talked about, which is define very well what you're not gonna build right now, right? But on a good note, if someone is saying it's gonna take 9 months, it's better than when someone says it's gonna take 3 and then takes 9, right? How to nourish company culture as a non-technical founder while dealing with so much uncertainty? Wow. I think being yourself, that's the first thing you need to think about when thinking about culture, and really caring about people. Yeah, that's the only way I think you can make culture happen. How do I know I can trust my tech team if I don't have the knowledge to evaluate their code? Yeah, that's a perfect question. By checking if your software works every day. That's the only way you can do it. You cannot wait a week for people to release something to you Maybe in the first 1 or 2 weeks of the project you can, but after that you can check it. You need to check every day the working software, the software that's being developed, not the one that's live. You should use it on your own device every day and see if it works. If it does not work, if something does not work, you should talk to your developers, and you're gonna start developing a sense if they're bullshitting you or if they're really serious about making it work. I think that's the best thing. Well, the other thing is you should check their track record. You should talk to people that worked with them in the past. That's how you do it before you start with them. After you start with them, you use your product every day. How do I know if the code that is being written allows me to scale? It's a great question. People are coming up with great questions today. There are two ways of seeing it, right? Being at a good place for scale is actually doing less first, because the needs for when you have to scale are unknown. You don't know exactly what you're gonna need to scale in your code base. So being lean allows you to scale just because you're gonna have less thing to rewrite, because some things are gonna have to be rewritten. Okay, you won't escape that. But other than that is making sure that the things that are currently working. Okay, imagine you have a checkout process, you have a payment system in place. If the payment system is currently working and you are able to make changes to that fast, that's the way a non-technical people can understand if the work is easy to maintain and to scale. If you ask, for example, for the payment to, I don't know, make a field that was mandatory become not mandatory and it takes a while to build, probably your code is not scalable. You don't have a good architecture. I think that's the way, the non-technical way of looking into the code, right? So, non-technical founders, I want you to send me great questions as those that I just read. And I want you to send me via LinkedIn, via nontechnicalfounders.com, via my personal email, which is daniel@season.cc, or whatever medium you want to send me. And then I'm going to talk about it, share my experience, and see if they resonate with you. Thank you. Talk soon.